I've got some things I want to run over quickly with you about from this morning, and I saw on the screen the theme from this morning, so I'm going to try to enlighten you on that, or to give you more of what I had on that, and then move on to the afternoon presentation. In this morning's presentation, I sought to argue or to suggest or to give a thesis that the church that is essential is one or a denomination that has come to clarity and conviction about its mission. I have, in at least two churches I pastored, sought to help the leadership to develop mission statements. And in reflecting on my activities of my leadership in that regard, I am not as fascinated by the statement that we were able to hammer out together as I am about the process of trying to get people to begin to think and get on the right page, the same page with each other. What I discovered in both churches in seeking to do this is that we make a lot of assumptions that everybody sitting in the pew and those in the pulpit or in the choir loft are on the same page. And inevitably, when we began to talk about what is the mission of this church, we found people at various divergences of opinion about what the church ought to be about. And so I'm not a proponent of making mission statements as much as I am encouraging people to search or wrestle with the process that leads to some mission statement. I also contended this morning that a church that is serious about its mission has to go through something of a wilderness experience, or pastor or parishioner who is serious about doing the work of God and being effective in that work has to struggle with the devil. Now, some folk who are more sophisticated would use different language. Some folk use Satan. When I was in seminary, we used demonic. That whatever the language is, there's a force that counteracts whatever you're about. And you've got to deal with that force. Call it the devil, call it Satan, call it demonic. It is real. The other part of this process of simplifying mission and vision requires that we not only develop conviction about what we're about, clarity so we can be concise about it, but also movement. Rainer and Rainer contends that the churches that are essential, that are simplistic or have simplified their vision, always experience movement. And I contend that one of the reasons why we encounter so much negativity from time to time in local churches and even denominationally, it stems from people's unrest over the fact that they don't see us moving. They don't see the movement taking place. I invite any pastor in this audience, or parishioner for that matter, whose church has or will experience difficulties or crises, watch what's going on. Now, sometimes movement does cause friction and unrest. But when people are negative about things that don't matter in the life of the church, I contend it's because they have not been helped to understand that we are on a journey. We are in movement. Somewhere in my notes, I read about a train. It's called, in fact, in the Mega Train. Some of you read that book, Mega Trends. There is a story about railroads. That the railroads used to be the most prestigious corporations in America. In fact, the Pennsylvania Railroad Company was chosen to be the best corporation in America in its day. But no longer is this the case, because during the process, the railroad business, including Pennsylvania, forgot that their business was transportation and started focusing in on the railroad. Remember, there was a song in the 60s, working on the railroad. Don't sing it? Oh, thank you. Thank you for reminding me, because I was almost to forget. Almost lost my mind. That lady coming there, she's the singer in the family. Bishop Williamson calls her Gladys Knight. Yeah. All right. But how easy it is to do it. And Bishop Stewart spoke so eloquent and profound to this last night with focusing. And that's one of the aspects of this business of simplifying and becoming a central church, is focus. But how easy it is for us to forget why we are in business. Bishop Blakey tells the story, some of you heard me retell it, that there was this missionary who had a ritual of boiling his soup. And while his soup was cooling off, he would go say his prayers. Every day, the same routine. Boil the soup, go say his prayers. And finally, one day after he got up off his knees and came back to the stove where his soup was, he found the bowl but no soup. The cat had slipped in and lapped up the soup while he was saying his prayers. He didn't kill the cat. He simply boiled his soup, tied up the cat, and then went and said his prayers. But there were others who observed his ritual. And when he died, they decided to continue the ritual of boiling soup, tying up cats, saying your prayers. And finally, at church conference one night, someone made a motion. Brother Pastor, I move that we stop boiling soup and cut out saying our prayers, and let's just tie up cats. Somebody raised their hand and said, Brother Pastor, I second the motion. And they voted. They would simply tie up cats. I hope somebody said I was cutting this morning. I'm not trying to cut. I'm in so much a love of this church. It's kind of reminded me of one of my members in the 4th District this morning after the session said to me that if Brax Chapel was not a member of the CME church, she would not be CME. She loves her church just that much. But sometimes we need to face reality that a lot of what we're doing is simply tying up cats. And so we go out of business because that is not our business. And so clarity, conviction, clarity, movement, and movement requires intentional, sequential steps. And in movement is also divine presence. In fact, I ran across something the other day studying on the word transformation. The word transformation in Scripture, metamorphosis, is in the passive voice, but present tense. Transformation. Passive voice, but present tense. And it was an eye-opening experience for me for what it suggested then. Is that when we talk about transformation in the church, the passive voice suggests that there's another entity at work in the transformation experience. We call it God of the Holy Spirit. That we cannot transform ourselves. So we are in the passive voice, although we may be in the present tense. It is only as the movement of the Holy Spirit is with us that there's transformation in our lives. And I contend that with movement not only comes intentionality and transformation, but comes motivation. One of the serious challenges we face is a morale issue. Bishop Willimon of the United Methodist Church, who presides in Alabama, I believe, in his book on clergy, what is that? Clergy, something about clergy and their call. Clergy and call. Says that the real issue facing the church today is morale. That when you look at whatever misbehavior, whatever disconnects that are taking place, whatever inactivity is taking place in the church, is because of morale. When people don't believe they're going anywhere, they stop working. They stop paying. They stop caring and coming. But when they are motivated, they work harder. They are less negative. They trust leadership more. They give more generously, and they stay involved. 2 or 3 other pieces on this morning presentation I want to say, and I'm going to move on. But also, it's a step-by-step. I believe what they call is steps, not programs. That in looking at an essential church, when you deal with mission, you've got to talk about how do we get from point A to point Z. And before you come up with a program and before you elect officers, you need to have your steps in place. Now, to go step by step means you got to try to know where you're going. That's where vision comes in. And then you got to be in moving from step by step, in envisioning the process, it means people got to work together to make it happen. But the other piece that Rainer and Rainer contends in this business of an essential church becoming essential and simplistic in its vision requires alignment. A church that is mission possible has to promote a sense of unity that becomes magnetic. This past Sunday morning, some of us of the College of Bishops and our spouses worshiped at the Brown Memorial Church. That pastor there leading us in worship did something that many of us as pastors take for granted, that we knew why we were there. And so in his call to worship, he pigeonholed worship. We're here to worship. To worship. And several times in the worship experience, he came again to us to say, we're here to do what? To worship. Now, I know you say, that's elementary. But when you get 100 folk together sitting in an assembly, you can't take it for granted everybody's on the same page. Just like I mentioned about the mission statement, that one of the beautiful things about doing mission statements is not the mission statement you come out with, it's the process. Because people are at different angles and different levels and different perspectives. But when we dialogue and wrestle with each other, somewhere along the way we're going to come closer to what we ought to be about. And so we have to work to get people aligned, to narrow the focus, to rebrand ourselves. Thus we must, they said, teach less for more. And then as Bishop Stewart did this marvelous job last night, I just mentioned the word focus. Focus.